The George Courts department store is one of K Road's landmark buildings. In 1886, two brothers, George and Frederick Court, established a drapery shop in Auckland. In 1889, they were joined by their brother John, who, with his wife Sarah and their 8 children, had emigrated to New Zealand. By this time, the business had expanded and they had a second store. Frederick retired about 2 years after John's arrival. The firm continued to trade as Court Brothers, drapers and clothiers in Karangahape Road and Queen Street. By 1902, George and John Court were operating from 3 shops, and with their older sons entering the business, they decided to dissolve the partnership and establish separate firms. It was an amicable arrangement. George remained in Karangahape Road and John took over the 2 Queen Street shops. After 1910, the John Court department store on the corner of Queen Street and Victoria Street East was known as the DSC, following the purchase of the Direct Supply Company. The JCL corner was a landmark and favourite meeting place for citizens and visitors to Auckland. In 1966, John Court Limited was purchased by an Auckland-based syndicate, and in 1972 it was sold to Cornish Investments Limited of Wellington, and soon afterwards the Queen Street store was closed. The motto of John Court was that the JCL corner was always busy, which was less of an idle boast than a plain statement of fact. On the facade of his premises in K Road, George Court had an image of a beehive, indicating the level of activity in his business, but also implying the presence of that much-loved virtue of the Victorian period, industriousness. Over the years, the George Court store expanded its premises and took over several small shops along K Road. Its motto became the Big Store, presumably referring not only to its size but also its range of goods. An attempt was made to provide a unified facade treatment across the 3 or 4 disparate wooden structures, but like many other shops before and since, eventually the decision was made to erect a new building. The site on Karangahape Road was the highest point in the Auckland street system, so the construction of a big store there would be very noticeable. The new building was to be of fireproof, reinforced concrete construction. It was designed around 1922 by the architect Clinton Savage and opened in 1924. It boasted large metal-framed windows and huge floor plates clear of pillars. In the centre of the building rose a grand cast-iron staircase and electric lifts with inlaid wooden interiors and uniformed attendants delivered customers to each floor. The huge windows were designed to display Persian carpets and fabric drops to attract attention from the other side of the street. At night it was brilliantly lit by electric lights and was visible across the whole isthmus of Auckland. The big store had arrived. The style of the building is influenced by the work of the Vienna Secessionist School of Architecture, notably the work of Otto Wagner. Another influence was doubtless Frank Lloyd Wright of the Chicago School. The building is one of the best pieces of architecture in Auckland, but strangely little is known of its architect, Clinton Savage. This is apparently only his second building. His first is a 2-storey retail block in Cambridge in the Waikato. His only other known work is the Pukekohe Hospital in the 1950s. It is curious that someone could create a work of this scale and quality early on in his career, and thereafter apparently do no other work of note. For many years the roof of George Courts sported 2 huge radio antennae, from which the 1YA radio frequency was broadcast across Auckland. The first broadcasting house was located in France Street, just behind the store. The commanding location of the building and its reinforced concrete construction resulted in its use during the Second World War as a central air raid command for Auckland. A reinforced room was fitted out in the basement for this purpose. The George Courts department store sadly closed in the 1980s, but its legacy remains an important part of K Road.